Hello and welcome, everybody. You are joining the Building Climate Resilience session hosted by the Urban Waters Learning Network, linking historic policies and today's risks. My name is Diana Toledo. I am the Senior River Program Manager at River Network, and I am one of the coordinators for the Urban Waters Learning Network, which is the host for this session. I am joined today by my colleague, Jaleesa Gilmore, who is the Senior Manager of Environmental Justice Programs at Groundwork USA, who is our counterpart organization in coordinating the Learning Network, and she will be moderating the Q&A today. So just to kind of get us started, want to introduce those of you who are new to the Learning Network. The Urban Waters Learning Network is a peer-to-peer network. We are made up of people and organizations that are working to conserve, restore, and revitalize the waterways of our country. And we do that by supporting our members' work through tools, training, mentoring, and financial assistance. And so training such as this is how we bring folks together to learn about some of the different strategies to address climate risk in our communities. This session today is just meant to be a foundational session for what will be a 6-session series. We are launching it today. We're going to take next month off in the month of August and restart it in September, and it will go through January. So we just want to welcome you on this learning journey, and we hope that you will join us not only today but for the length of the series. And just to get us going, the whole series is founded on the idea that we must integrate equity into our climate resilience work. And I want to share with you a quote that I read today. If you're not familiar with the Anti-Racism Daily, it's a great newsletter. And today they offered in their newsletter a framing that really resonated with me. And so the quote that I want to share is this: "There are some for whom climate catastrophe is a cause for hand-wringing concern about their hypothetical grandchildren's living standards. There are others for whom the crisis arrived years ago." And in a nutshell, that is the spirit on which we have designed this session, with a recognition that for some in our communities, the impacts of climate risk are very real. They're very real today. They have been real for a while. And the impacts of those changes to our climate are not being felt by everybody in the same way. And so it's with an eye towards those that are most vulnerable in our communities that we put together this series to help us all make sure that our work is really inclusive of their priorities, their concerns, their experiences. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers today. We have great speakers, and you'll see that Groundwork USA and their network are well represented here. We're going to be kicked off by Dr. Jeremy Hoffman Hayes. He is the Director of Climate Justice and Impact at Groundwork USA. He is new to that organization, where he's developing science-based metrics to track the impact of Groundwork USA's programs on climate and workforce development. Before joining Groundwork, Dr. Hoffman was chief scientist at the Science Museum of Virginia, where he led community science, youth, and adult climate resilience programs. He also serves as the chapter lead for the Southeast chapter of the 5th National Climate Assessment, and was named a fellow with the American Association for the Advancement of Science in 2021. We're lucky to have him. Welcome, Jeremy. His presentation will be followed by Kelsey Hawkins Johnson, who is the Community Climate Resilience Program Director at Groundwork Ohio Valley. She's been involved in climate advocacy work at both the national and international scale, working to center frontline communities in decision making. She leads that organization's Climate Safe Neighborhoods program, and she'll share some of that work today. And then finally, we will hear from Candida Rodriguez. Candida is responsible for implementing community engagement programs, marketing, communication, and public relations strategies at Groundwork Hudson Valley in New York. She has a background in international development and has spent over a decade working with local nonprofits, government entities, and international organizations on climate change, gender equality, migration, education, and other issues. So welcome to all three of our presenters. At the end, we'll take questions that Jaleesa will facilitate the Q&A, but we encourage you to drop them into the chat as the presentations proceed. So with that, let me turn it to Dr. Jeremy Hoffman. Thank you, Jeremy.
Throughout the southern part of the United States, across China, across Western Europe right now. I mean, basically the entire world is experiencing more frequent heat extremes. So global climate change pushes us towards those extremes, kind of in the background. That's going on in the climate background. And then at the local level, there are built environment decisions that can further exacerbate those climate stressors. So the local built environment can either reinforce and further strengthen those extremes or work to reduce them. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to do a quick overview of what global climate change is. Then we're going to talk about how the local built environment informs localized risks for heat and precipitation, and then talk about the practice of redlining and how that works in relation to these things. And then I will summarize with a little bit of what's going on at the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program before handing it over to Kelsey and Candida to show you what that looks like on the ground. So many of you already know this story. Global climate change has been intensifying over the last few years. This is a representation of global climate or global temperatures through time since about 1850 on the far left and 2021 on the far right. The colors correspond to how weird that temperature was relative to the long-term 20th century average. And what you can see on in the kind of to farther right are the warmer years accumulating ever since about 1970. In fact, you'd have to be somewhere around like 36 or 37 years old to have lived on the planet the last time the global monthly average temperature was lower than the 20th century average. So you'd have to be an elder millennial or older to have lived on the planet before we have been basically consistently over the 20th century average at a monthly scale. What does this mean to long-term? Well, it turns out that the long-term trajectory of the climate system entirely depends on the choices that we make today. If we change the color of those bars to just this white line here, this gold star represents where we are relative to the long-term 20th century average. We've warmed about 1 degree Celsius, or about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of the last century or so. And in the future, entirely the long-term warming of the climate system depends on our choices right now. Whether we decide to continue emitting heat-trapping gases, which further exacerbates the greenhouse gas effect, which causes global warming and global climate change, or we decide to commit to substantial cuts in emissions across virtually every aspect of human civilization, especially in the global north and Western hemisphere. Now, current policies, the ones that are agreed upon by global governments right now, puts us on the order of about 3 degrees Celsius by 2100. So current policies are not the worst case scenario that we imagined even 10 years ago, but we're still a far way off of hitting the substantial cuts in emissions that keep our long-term global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. Now we know that the global climate change has localized impacts to the United States, mostly in the central and east. That's increased temperatures, that's the longer, stronger heat waves, more extreme precipitation events. Anyone living in a coastal city also appreciates the amount of sea level rise that we've seen, which exacerbates local nuisance flooding, makes it hard for you to get between your house and your place of worship or your job or the grocery store. People out in the West, of course, know about the wildfires that have been getting worse over the last few decades. And then many of us in the central and eastern United States have been breathing that smoke over the last couple of summers. So these climate impacts, really the intensity of them corresponds to the total amount of global warming that we see. And I can really summarize that into 5 emojis. That we are already and expecting a hotter, wetter, sneezier, and wheezier climate in the right now than in the past and in the future. Now, I'm going to focus a little bit on that hotter sense, because we also know that there are changes to the local built environment, decisions that we make about how the world is built around us that can either amplify or dampen that long-term warming of the climate system. Things like how we design our city's geometry, how we actually deal with waste heat, and what we physically build our communities out of tend to add extreme heat to a settlement. Now, more natural environments, more natural landscapes, things like vegetation, parks, forests, gardens, tend to really lower temperatures relative to the background climate. So even within a city, you can imagine how 2 neighborhoods, one that has very built up heat retaining properties and very little vegetation, would be much warmer than a neighborhood with extensive amounts of parks, gardens, and forests. Now, in fact, we can talk about how that then might relate to public health. Extreme heat kills more Americans than any other weather-related stressor over the last few decades, even more so than flooding, tornadoes, and hurricanes. We also know that those health impacts are not felt equally across our communities and across the generations that we live among. Typically, the most vulnerable or susceptible to heat-related illness and mortality tend to be elderly, the chronically ill, the very, very young. And it's becoming clearer and clearer through, this is a picture from 1995 heat wave in Chicago, that Black communities feel the impacts, the health impacts of these heat extremes more so and more acutely than the white communities just a few blocks away. We also know that heat doesn't distribute itself equally between environments. And in fact, this is where you get to play a little bit of additional thing here. Get ready to type into the chat where you think the hottest surface to the touch in this photo is. Type it into the chat and get ready to send on 3. Where would you go to touch the hottest spot in this picture? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Nice, good response. Great response. Now, on the flip side of that, I want you to think about where you would go to see the coolest spot to the touch. Where are you going to go and touch the coolest place? Go ahead and type it in, and then on 3, we're going to press enter. 1, 2, 3. Nice, okay. We've got a whole bunch of different hypotheses, and you wouldn't have a scientist participating in this conversation if we couldn't test it with a scientific tool. We can use FLIR cameras, these very low-cost sensors, to actually take pictures of the built environment and reveal the heat right in front of us. As you can see, those hot asphalt surfaces are the hottest spot to the touch. These are the brightest colors, the hottest temperatures. The shade, on the other hand, is the coolest place. But everything in between tells us even more. The colors of the cars correspond to their surface temperatures. The types and the relative nativeness of vegetation in this picture plays a role in their temperatures. So we can learn a lot about how we design our spaces just from this one picture. Now, when we think about how those surfaces relate to the temperatures in our cities, we've actually been working on several community science approaches to analyzing this. And in 2017, Groundwork RVA, along with a bunch of partners from around the city of Richmond, Virginia, found a 16-degree Fahrenheit difference between the coolest and warmest place at the exact same time using thermometers that were attached to cars. Now, in follow-up studies, we started to recognize that the heat pockets in the city, those intra-urban heat islands, corresponded directly to places that had been redlined in the 1930s. Redlining was a practice of basically denying wholesale access to wealth building through the form of real estate investment that was undertook in over 200 cities nationwide, and primarily immigrant communities and communities of color were assigned these D ratings, or the most hazardous rating, leading to the topic or the name of redlining. Now, what's interesting is that even at that time, these neighborhoods were already referred to in a very different way. On the left here, this is A and B neighborhoods. These are the best, as far as their rating system goes, the best neighborhoods were already shaded and wooded and had golf courses in them. Meanwhile, on the flip side, the C and D rated neighborhoods were already being referred to as paved and hot and flat and sewers. So even at the time, even in the 1930s, it seems like there was an environmental disparity going on. Now, Stephen DeBerry gives a really good TED talk that I just want to quickly mention, why the wrong side of the tracks is usually the east side of cities. It turns out that redlining was just one of many decisions that has played into how our cities are sorted by race and class. And so please go and take a look at this. It's really fascinating. Turns out that our results showed that these formerly redlined areas were significantly hotter than their non-redlined counterparts, and they have not, probably, as you could imagine, many fewer trees and much more paved over surfaces. Now, we found this in 94% of the cities that we studied as part of that redlining database. And we've followed up and shown that not only is it hotter and there are fewer trees, the trees that are there are smaller, making them less efficient machinery of nature. At the same time, while these areas have more built up surfaces, they also have higher flood risk. So this map is blue in places where FEMA underestimates flood risk. And by looking at it through the lens of redlining, formerly redlined neighborhoods have more parcels at risk for flooding than their non-redlined counterparts. This is also dependent on the city that you live in and the region that you're living in, identified through a Redfin survey. And we know that these places that were redlined served as the map for where the interstate system was installed many years later. So these areas also have worse air quality. This means there are clear health disparities between these redlined and non-redlined areas. This leads to real world outcomes, things like asthma and other chronic diseases. Now, this means that our neighbors were already experiencing hotter, wetter, sneezier, and wheezier conditions before climate change was a threat. And now add climate change on top of this, very much localized action is needed. This is where I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues from the Groundwork Trust that are part of the Climate Safe Neighborhoods cohort, where they're going to share with you about how the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program builds capacity in these communities to build real systems change around building climate resilience in their neighborhoods. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to hand it over to Kelsey. Is Kelsey here, Deanna? Okay, great.
Yes,
Kelsey's up next.
Yes, Kelsey, if you want to go ahead and start sharing your slides.
Yes.
Welcome, you can take it away. Kelsey, you're on mute, Kelsey. There you go.
Okay, I'm back. All right. So thank you, everyone. My name is Kelsey Hawkins Johnson. I'm with Groundwork Ohio River Valley, based in the greater Cincinnati region. And we are one of many trusts throughout the United States that's working on this program called Climate Safe Neighborhoods. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about our model here in the Ohio River region and our collaboration with local government like the city of Cincinnati, as well as with other stakeholders like the Regional Sustainability Alliance Green Umbrella. So there are some goals within Climate Safe Neighborhoods that we tend to talk about within our program and when we're doing community engagement, exploring and communicating the relationship between the climate crisis and racism, support the capacity of residents to advocate for the distribution of resources, especially equitable distribution, develop and implement short-term mitigation measures to extreme heat and flooding events, as well as to impact policy to prioritize equitable climate resiliency. So these goals are embedded within our programming at Climate Safe, which I'll be talking about some of like what we've been working on, as well as our relationship with the local government and with our other organizations that we collaborate with within the Climate Safe Neighborhood Partnership. So for Climate Safe neighborhoods, we first identify who are the most vulnerable of extreme heat and flooding events. Like Jeremy was talking about, there are redlining maps that can help with determining those vulnerable communities. Here at Groundwork, we use GIS and geospatial data, as well as the environmental justice screening tool that is through the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the EPA. And then here at Groundwork, we call the focus groups that we tend to collaborate with is climate advisory groups, and it's based around educating what climate change is and what that looks like within our community, the history of the neighborhood, as well as creating a climate resilience plan, or what we also call a climate action plan for their neighborhood. So it's really neighborhood level based climate planning. And then lastly, we have green workforce and youth involvement within our program. So working to have more of like green workforce to implement the strategies that have come out of those climate resilient plans, which include gardens and trees, as well as green roofs. And we also dive into policy as well. So just a little bit of brief, what Jeremy was talking about is using systems like GIS to identify vulnerable neighborhoods. This is a map of the city of Cincinnati, and looking at the 1925 zoning policies, which help us to determine what properties and those in power chose to exclude from their planning. So we're able to see some of that here in a historic zoning policy plan, which is the city plan for Cincinnati. And then here, also at Groundwork, we were able to map out some of that. So we have here just a view of what Cincinnati is, and this is the Ohio River right here. The minority populations are the green dots. Industrial zoning is the blue areas that you see here. And then the yellow is residential zoning. And this is more of a context to deciding who we're going to engage with around having these conversations around environmental justice and climate resilience. Lastly, I want to show you the different areas of Cincinnati as well, where we're able to see how the lack of tree canopy correlates with high heat temperature. So I'll be diving more into like the neighborhoods that we have engaged with so far and why. And that is because of information like this, which used from satellite imagery. We've worked with NASA Develop as well to help us determine some of this visual identification of the city of Cincinnati and the neighborhoods that are the most vulnerable due to having less tree canopy or dealing with high temperatures. And we do have a Climate Safe Neighborhoods dashboard, which we do have a link for you all to check out as well. And what we also do with, all the data that we look for, which is like census data, the environmental justice screening tool, and all of that, we combine it into a dashboard, which is on our website. And we also use the lived experiences of community members who say which area within their neighborhood has extreme heat, where there is the most flooding in their neighborhood, and we map that out as well in our dashboard. So I want to start talking about our relationship with the City of Cincinnati government and their collaboration with us to develop climate advisory groups. So this all started through the City of Cincinnati. They were awarded a grant from the National League of Cities, and it was to add more inclusion and equity into their 2023 Green Cincinnati plan. And at the same time in 2020 was when Groundwork was awarded the Climate Safe Neighborhoods grant through Groundwork USA and the Kresge Foundation and all of the grantees, or the funders who were able to support climate safe neighborhoods. So Groundwork Ohio River Valley, as well as the National League of Cities and our close collaboration with Green Umbrella, we decided to form a group to create something that's called a climate advisory group. So both of our initiatives can have impact and that we're working towards the same things. So the city of Cincinnati was looking for more conversations around equity and having more community member inclusion. And we were looking to start having conversations around climate resilience and equity and what that looks like with housing and racism and just adding all of that into the mix. So that's a little bit how that got started. And they're one of our close collaborators with the continuation of the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program in Greater Cincinnati. We decided to start first in Lower Price Hill, which is, it's a neighborhood that not only is Groundwork based in, but it has a lot of historic indicators as well to being in an environmental injustice community due to its location, its industrial, the air pollution as well. So that was where we decided to have the first pilot. And a little bit about what a climate advisory group is. Just this model is, it's a climate cohort to voice concerns of community members. We tend to have between 10 to 20 community members that join a climate advisory group, and they are paid for their time to create an action plan for their neighborhood and get to know more about the historic and indicators of climate change, as well as they get to talk with the city of Cincinnati about their needs. So it was very unique during this time to have the city of Cincinnati attend every meeting. The person who's now the director of the Office of Environment Sustainability, he attended almost every meeting. There were representatives there to be there and support and be there to listen. So that was really a great effort on the city's part. And this is just an example of a climate resilience plan for Lower Price Hill, which was our first pilot, where they outlined community cooling centers and green space. Since then, there has been implementation of community gardens, a green roof, as well as being initiated on a Cincinnati public school. And also more trees have been planted as well, which you see here. The majority of these trees have been planted with our collaboration with Cincinnati Parks and other groups within the city. We also engage with two other communities in Cincinnati. They're historic African-American communities, Bond Hill and Roselawn, where they also developed the climate resilience plan, just like Lower Price Hill. And this is just a picture of us at a community garden event that was hosted by local community members. And lastly, our latest cohort was the 5 neighborhoods of the Mill Creek Valley, which includes North Fairmount and Millville. So this is an example of just their resilience plan and a tree planting that happened since then. But I want to explore and talk with you all a little bit more about the inclusion of working with policy and the climate advisory group model. This is an example of the Green Cincinnati Plan process. At this time, the Green Cincinnati Plan has been published, and it includes the resilient plans from the neighborhoods that we engaged with. And in addition to that, it includes information from some smaller community events that Groundwork and Green Umbrella were able to host within the city of Cincinnati. During the Green Cincinnati Plan process, we also included community members and future leaders of their neighborhoods to be included in the equity committee and to join these subcommittee focus areas. So you see here how embedded climate safe neighborhoods is with the climate resilient plans and all of the ideas. It has been used as an important model to advance equity and the conversation around resilience within the Green Cincinnati Plan, and that's reflected through now there being a resilience section based off the 2018 plan. There wasn't that, and now there being an established equity committee as well. And we did have smaller events that we called Climate Safe Lights, which are one-day events. We had our first one that was a bilingual session, which is on the right. And we hope to create a transparency and accountability platform called Citizen Lab with the City of Cincinnati to share the results of the community engagement meetings, and also to advocate for folks to contribute their ideas and strategies to be included in the Green Cincinnati Plan. So now that the Green Cincinnati Plan has been published, climate safe neighborhoods and the cohort of the climate advisory groups from the neighborhoods that we have engaged with, what happens next? So we have been talking with the city around using the Green Cincinnati Plan funds. They have money set aside for equity and implementation efforts that are based from what has been coming from the climate safe neighborhoods, cohorts and all of that. So we are in negotiation talks and just going back and forth with them about how to use the funds, but definitely including community members to voice their opinion about how to use those funds. So there is going to be a Green Cincinnati Plan workshop with an additional climate advisory group for them to voice where they would like to see, what has been prioritized in the Green Cincinnati Plan within their community. And then we're talking with the city to go back with the communities that they engaged with, like Roseland, Bond Hill, and Lower Price Hill, to say, what's the next step? What is something that you want to see prioritized and funded based off what you have outlined within your plan, and continue to build the leadership of residents. So at Groundwork, we have been able to hire 2 community organizers and be able to support and pay additional skill shares and all of that and training for community members after the climate advisory groups, have them be involved in policy as well as planning for future resilient efforts within their neighborhood. So I will be welcome to answer any questions you have. And now I'll hand it off to Candida to talk a little bit about Groundwork Hudson Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. And while Candida is uploading her presentation, want to please invite questions in the chat. And also, we will be sharing a web page after the session that will include the recording and links to all of these resources that are being mentioned. I'm trying not to overpopulate this chat box, so keep an eye out for that. All right, Candida, looks like you're set to go. Thanks.
Thanks, Deanna. Hi, everyone. My name is Candida Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Community Relations at Groundwork Hudson Valley. Great to be here. I will turn off my camera at some point during my presentation because I am having internet issues. Just wanted to give you a heads up. But a little bit about Groundwork. We follow the Groundwork USA model, and we're part of the Groundwork network. Groundwork Hudson Valley is based in Yonkers, New York, and our mission is to create sustainable environmental change in urban neighborhoods through our community-based partnerships that promote equity, youth leadership through our youth employment program, and economic opportunity. Here are some of the points that we're going to cover today. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into understanding Yonkers and the links between historic policies that were discriminatory towards communities of color and today's climate risks, as well as some of our climate strategies and ways that we build resilience within the community. So Yonkers is the largest city in Westchester County, and it's also the largest city in the state of New York. It has a population of over 200,000, and its population is very diverse as well as multicultural, including many different ethnicities and backgrounds. As Jeremy explained, we know that it's getting hotter and it's getting wetter, and research shows that we're experiencing more frequent extreme weather events because of climate change, and this is impacting communities and making it harder to adapt. However, not all communities can adapt equally. To provide some context, Yonkers, like many cities in the United States, has a history that's marked by racially discriminatory practices such as redlining, And these poor policies have influenced how resources have been distributed, affecting things such as housing patterns, economic opportunities, and access to critical resources. Now, what that means in today's context is that Yonkers now faces the consequences of these decisions as we experience more frequent and intense heat waves and other things such as floods and storms, which pose a threat on public health, on the infrastructure and the environment. As you can see from this map, low income and Black and Brown communities reside mostly in the southwest area of Yonkers, which is also the areas where the highest concentration of urban heat islands are. And this is, of course, by design. So as part of the Climate Safe Neighborhoods Initiative, we were able to gather data and clearly see which neighborhoods are most vulnerable to extreme heat and flooding. And as you know, many of these neighborhoods were in previously redlined areas. And this mapping tool, what it has done is allowed us to prioritize the neighborhoods in which we work in our climate resilience efforts. As you can see here, this shows overlays of impervious surfaces as well as where the concentration of heat happens across Yonkers, redlined communities, and percentage of tree canopy coverage. Now, in today's context, and just last week, we saw how intense rain flooded many towns and neighborhoods across the Hudson Valley. Actually, this left many roads inaccessible and at least one person dead and many more missing. And this is an experience that we're having constantly now. We partnered with the New School Urban Systems Lab to conduct a localized flood modeling. And what this modeling allows us to do is to showcase the area that are at risk of experiencing flooding. And this data has helped us develop targeted and as well as context-specific climate resilience strategies. As you can see here, you can see a 100-year storm modeling of one of the areas in Yonkers, McLean Avenue, and how that would look like, or at least the ability to probably experience flooding. So similar to Groundwork Ohio River Valley, we have used a community capacity building program as our climate resilience strategy, which we call the Climate Safe Yonkers Task Force. Ohio River Valley calls them their advisory groups, and it's essentially a very similar model. We recruited 30 diverse members of the community to help us identify potential community-specific hazards, as well as vulnerabilities and opportunities. We did go through a process with community members where they were able to identify those hazards and point to them as well and share their experiences to better inform our strategies. We then, in partnership with the city of Yonkers and Star White House, which is a landscape and architect firm who focuses a lot on community engagement, we worked with them over a course of a year to have community members prioritize their needs and also localize interventions and specific resilience and mitigation strategies, and ultimately promote these strategies and interventions via outreach and education. And the photo that you see is a picture of some of the task force members along with community leaders and city officials at the announcement of the Yonkers Climate Action Plan, which I will be speaking about shortly. Here, you can see the task force engaging in workshops, tabling events, community meetings, and different community events. We really have been working towards building resiliency and promoting action and empowerment within the community. This is important because it ensures that the community is taking ownership of the changes that are going to be happening in their communities. This is a timeline of our process to recruit, engage with the community members in this task force. I won't go into too much detail about it. However, I do like to dig a little bit deeper into how the task force had played a role in the planning and the development of the newly published climate action plan, the Yonkers Climate Action Plan. So this, to me, is an example of a systems change. The city actively engaged the task force and community to provide very valuable feedback and insights of things that were and issues that were happening in their communities. And I remember actually one community member sharing that when it's too hot, they can't take their kids to the park because they burn themselves going down the slides. So these are valuable insights that we gathered through these community meetings. We worked really closely with the director of sustainability for the mayor's office to make sure that this process included the people who are most vulnerable and have also been historically left out of the decision-making process. Many of the residents living in the urban heat islands and areas with limited tree cover and green spaces, and also tend to be flood-prone zones, are also residents of municipal housing and affordable housing properties. And as part of a larger climate justice effort, we partnered with the Yonkers Housing Authority and WestHab, which is an affordable housing nonprofit, to make sure that the homes of these vulnerable populations are more climate resilient. And to ensure that our approach was backed by data, we partnered with another landscape architect firm to conduct a heat and flooding feasibility study at 10 of these municipal housing properties, which provided us with the insights and the data to secure more funding and implement nature-based improvements utilizing a combination of green and gray infrastructure. In one of the largest affordable housing systems in the region, aside from the New York City NYCHA system. So we're currently working with our Green Team, which is our youth employment program that we run. And it's a group of 30 Yonkers public high school students, some which are actually municipal housing residents themselves, to work on these green infrastructure projects. They have planted trees, created more green spaces, and built rain gardens and installed infiltration trenches at 2 of the 10 housing sites, which helps us to work together with Macy to address both extreme heat and flooding. So this is a photo of the Green Team, and to the right is the infiltration trench that we're digging out at one of the Macy properties, which is Lawrence Christopher Townhouses in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. The Green Team worked in the site, and they cleared out vegetation and installed this trench with pipes to help filtrate and reduce the stormwater runoff and flooding in the backyard. The Reagan Townhouses is another Macy property that is prone to experiencing extreme heat and flooding, although it is not in a floodplain. The property is, however, in a location where it has steep slopes, on both sides, and as you can see in the photos, one of the higher side is actually where Route 87 passes by. The property then slopes down into Central Park Avenue, if you guys are familiar with Yonkers. But as you can see, there is a steep hill in the backgrounds of this photo. And what this caused is water to rush down when it rains really heavily and it floods residents' backyards. So our team and our green team built a rain garden and also installed a trench. It worked on this last year. And if I can just share the story, while I was visiting the site with the green team, the gentleman whose house is right next to the rain garden to the left side of the photo shared that he was very stressed every time it rained heavily because the rainwater rushes down and his backyard floods almost every single time. However, since the rain garden was installed, his backyard didn't flood anymore. And he was saying this with a huge smile on his face. And it made me so happy for him that he wasn't so stressed out about, rain coming and flooding his backyard. And what we intend to do, our goal here is to address extreme heat and flooding, but also to create a green oasis for residents, and especially in areas that are lacking green spaces, and to address flooding as well, but overall to improve the quality of life of these vulnerable populations. So what's next for us? We are going to be continuing our projects at future Macy sites. We will be doing a lot of advocacy around implementation of the Yonkers Climate Action Plan, and as well as continue to engage the community and raise awareness. Some of the lessons learned, I'm sorry about the phone ringing. Some of the lessons learned, just very quickly, is that engaging the community is really important above anything else, because it involves a process where people that have been historically left out are actually taking ownership of these changes and of the actions that are taking place. Thank you.
All right, Jaleesa, I know you've been tracking some of the questions. If you want to kick us off on the Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Liana. Thank you so much, Jeremy, Candida, and Kelsey. So this first question is actually for Kelsey, but Candida and Jeremy, if you have anything that you want to share, feel free. And so Kelsey, what are some examples of the skills you shared in your workshops for your climate advisory groups?
Yeah, so we have community engagement activities as well as mapping activities. So they go through like mapping exercises. This looks like working with GIS data and working with the physical like look of their neighborhood and actually placing what that looks like for their community. So they're given like a legend. I didn't show a picture of that, but that's included, as well as survey work, going out and interviewing their neighbors about climate impact, what would they like to see. There was also photography that was used within the climate advisory group. So taking pictures of community concerns and assets within their neighborhood. That is also, we have that on our story maps to see just some of like what they've been working on within the climate advisory group. But that's a little bit like what they're trained on, as well as public speaking. There is a showcase after each climate advisory group where they present their findings and engage with stakeholders. And some folks already know how to like public speak and all of that, but it's an opportunity for those who have not. And we usually include youth, young adults to be a part of the group so they can learn about what climate change is, as well as some of these skills like engagement and survey and GIS.
Thanks, Kelsey. And so another question is, could you all talk a little bit about your community outreach and recruitment approaches for building your resident action groups? And either Candida or Kelsey.
Oh.
Yeah, whoever wants to start.
Okay, I could just answer that as well. At Groundwork, we have, since COVID, we had up to 3 climate advisory groups. So during COVID in 2021, we was online. So we did a lot of recruitment, social media, word of mouth as well, and flyers knocking on doors. And that was a bit of the same with our second climate advisory group. It was still, 2022, or actually 2021. It was that same year. So doing that, but there was more opportunities for public events. So going out to community councils when they have their meetings and going to different community days to spread the word about that, and also letting the local organizations know that are within that community and who have more of like a network to reach people to, to spread the word. And we have conversations with people about climate advisory group like that. And we really, in our third one, worked with a local community partner. We went to produce pop-ups, food pantries, and social media. And a lot of that has been through flyering and community groups who were interested in getting engaged.
I can jump in here. So we had a very similar approach to our recruitment, attending community events, spreading the word, as well as on social media, and posting up flyers at different municipal housing sites. We wanted to make sure that our group was diverse, and made sure that we were including seniors, youth, and different people who are normally not part of this conversation, like artists and business owners. And we thought that that is the best way to represent the community when you have many different types of people being part of this decision-making group, essentially. And one other thing that I didn't mention is that we actually pay our task force members for attending meetings. And I think this is a really important thing to do, because they're providing us with valuable information and resources that and they should be compensated for their time and their knowledge as well.
Yeah, to just build upon what Candida said, one of the biggest things that we found as a help in our community engagement in the city of Richmond has been around transportation. And one of the interesting pieces is even though our bus system is free right now, we have a fare free bus system. That is still an impediment in many ways to getting to locations for engagement activities. So some groups have worked together on Lyft, a business account through Lyft or Uber, and then you can put money into that in advance. Then people can use a code in order to order a car to go between the places. So it's a really like that kind of deep level of kind of like making sure that we had care for children, translation and ASL services, as well as this focus on making the transportation piece as easy as possible, is one of the ways that we've gotten to make sure that we removed as many barriers to participation as we could through our and to advertise our recruitment.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think we have time for one quick question. And so this was the next one that came in. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to long-term maintenance plans for the demonstration projects? And Candida, I believe that was asked during your presentation.
Yes. Our plan is we involve our green team to do a lot of the maintenance, and we recruit community members to also participate in the maintenance of their sites. In terms of funding, we do have grants that fund these projects in short and medium term, which helps us continue paying folks for their time and for their work. But ultimately, the goal here is to involve the community members in order for them to continue maintaining the sites and taking care of it.
Thank you, Candida. So this is all the time we have for questions today, but there were a couple of questions in the chat, so feel free, Jeremy, Candida, or Kelsey, to answer them while we're wrapping up.
All right, and just to close us off, I just dropped in here the link to the evaluation form. It would be wonderful if you could give us some feedback before we finish planning our next session. So please take a minute. One thing we're wondering is if these sessions should be maybe an hour and 15 minutes in length. So any feedback you can give us on that or any other input would be great, and we'll incorporate into the next. Again, this is one of 6 sessions. This was meant to just be a foundation. We want to encourage you to register for the upcoming sessions coming up in September. We'll be hearing from folks who have established resilience hubs as community centers to help folks, to help protect folks from climate disasters and to help them recover from disasters. And coming up in October, we're going to talk further about building local leadership for advocacy around these issues. So please take a look. I just dropped that link into the chat, and you can see all the rest coming up through the end of the year. So with that, I want to thank our 3 speakers, Jeremy, Kelsey, Candida. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience. And I want to thank all of you who took time today to join us. We'll follow up with a link to a page with a recording and a lot of these resources that were shared today. So really appreciate all of you being here on behalf of the Urban Waters Learning Network, and look forward to seeing you come September. And thank you, Jaleesa, for being my co-pilot on this session.
Thanks,
Take care. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.